Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You may have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed for you. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of your attendee control panel. You can send your questions in at any time during the presentation and we'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to tell you about the export advice and support available for UK businesses on great.gov.uk. After my introduction, you'll have a presentation on how to build a successful export business from scratch, followed by a Q&A session. Any questions left unanswered during today's webinar will be replied to you in the first instance by a DIT member of staff. Right now, the world wants UK goods and services. The quality of our products, our expertise, ethos and innovation, creating creative way of thinking and problem-solving capabilities are all reasons why people around the world are looking to the UK for products and services. The demand is out there and you should be too. Regardless of your exporting experience, you can access useful advice and support from great.gov.uk. It's the ideal starting point for UK businesses looking to export for the first time, or even for those businesses looking to do more. It brings together the best information from government, commercial and other partners. When visiting great.gov.uk website, you're able to select 3 different options: new to exporting, selling abroad occasionally, or experienced exporter. When you select new to exporting, this takes you through to information on exporting topics such as the benefits of exporting, how to get ready to sell overseas, how to research your market, routes to market, how to create an export plan, and further information to help you get started. You will also be able to find information on other webinars, events, trade fairs, and missions. Selecting selling abroad occasionally will also take you through to information on exporting, including how to sell online overseas. And you can use this service to help choose a suitable online marketplace to sell your products. You can find major online marketplaces in other countries, see whether these online marketplaces are suitable to sell your products, and discover how to list your products on the online marketplace. And to see whether these online marketplaces are suitable to sell your products, discover how to list your products, and get information about costs of listings on the marketplace and how logistics are fulfilled. Access special terms negotiated by the UK government on your behalf. And finally, by selecting Experienced Exporter, you will be able to access exporting information, including our Exporting Opportunities service, live exporting opportunities that have been sourced by our network and of our colleagues living and working overseas in more than 100 countries. New opportunities are added to the site every working day, and you can use exporting opportunities to find overseas opportunities for your products or services. It also shows you how to register and create a profile of your business for our Find a Buyer service that matches export-ready UK businesses with overseas buyers and of products and services. So please do visit great.gov.uk to find the advice and help that you will need to start selling overseas. It's now my pleasure to introduce your presenter today, Victoria Balderson from Bols Global. Victoria, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jill, for that. I'm just going to quickly share my webinar, my webcam, so everybody can see me, and that this is a live session that is taking place today. So thanks for your time this afternoon, everyone that's taken the time out to listen to me. My name is Victoria Balderson, and I will be running this session today on how to build a successful export business from scratch. I'm the founder of a company called Bols Global, we specialise in helping UK small health food and drink brands to export through a number of business development, marketing and training programs and services. So I'm really pleased to be running this session today, and I hope that you'll have plenty of questions to ask me at the end. We will be leaving about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for Q&A and a couple of polls as well. Having worked internationally for all of my career in various sales and marketing roles, and in different sectors as well, I've always worked for very small SME startup businesses where resources have been an issue. So I am fully aware of many of those challenges that small businesses do face when they decide to develop their international footprint on, fairly small budgets. So in terms of what I'm looking to achieve today with you, some of the key objectives really include being able to give you some practical tips and tools where you can start, where you should look to start, how to build your export capability and the different ways that is possible to do so, and who to turn to for support when you need it, because there is actually a wealth of support, guidance, associations that are there to help UK businesses to export. It's just a case of who to turn to for what different aspects of exporting that you may need. So before we start, I'm just going to then move on to the next slide. So there we go. So before we start, then really, I just wanted beforehand to give you a bit of a flavour about me and my background, just so you understand my past and my experience internationally that I've had. So as you can see, I originally started as a linguist and then have worked internationally. I'm a chartered marketeer, and I do work with the Chartered Institute of Marketing at a regional level up in Yorkshire. Currently, just finished an MBA at the Business School in Leeds as well. In terms of my experiences, I have worked for various sectors, as I mentioned, one of which was within engineering. And that very much was based where I led on a Latin American project to win six-figure business that was due to communication skills and understanding what the customers needed and were looking for out there. And I also helped to develop France, Poland, and some Swedish key accounts for that SME. I've then also worked, like I mentioned, for a startup environment within the medical devices sector. That was very much in the space of 3 years almost in post there. I developed business from about 200,000 in just 4 territories, predominantly through a distributor network, up to over £1 million, £1.4 million, and exporting to over 50 countries, as well as then developing a team of international account managers and other resource and support that we had within the business to help internationally, whether that was admin, also project work, interns, and whether working on a full or a part-time basis as well, due to lack of resource as well. After that, I then worked for a supplements manufacturer, whereby I was leading on a project for developing international branded supplements, mainly for the Middle East and Asian regions. I also worked on some business development for Middle East, Asia, and parts of Europe as well. Then more recently, I've obviously founded my business, Bolt Global, and we are set up now, like I say, to support health food and supplement brands to internationalize as well. Fantastic. Now I'm going to turn off my webcam now for the rest of the session, but hopefully you all listen and have plenty of questions to ask throughout. So that's me, and let's get into a little bit more about some of the content that we're looking at for this session. So the first part I wanted to look at really was, where on earth to start when you're setting up your business internationally. Now, obviously, there's two ways of looking at that. I mean, two aspects at play of this question. Literally, where do I start, as in geographically, which markets do I target? And we'll look at that shortly. But also there's another question of where do I start, as in how do I go about this? So for me, and one of the things that I cannot really stress enough is the importance of having a strategy in place, and that exporting is a key part of your corporate strategy. Without making export strategic, then in terms of having the success that you're looking to achieve, it can be very difficult. I mean, there is nothing wrong with having reactive opportunism, if you like, with international business. And for some people and some businesses, simply servicing those needs as and when they arise is fine. And there are supplementary sales, but you can't really necessarily see a growth and a sustained growth without really making it more higher on your business agenda and seeing the value in exporting from a strategic point of view. Making it part of your areas for growth and part of your overall business plan. For me, if you're wanting long-term success, then this really does need to happen. So in terms of being able to service that need as well, then I refer to the 3 Ps that need to support that. So that would be the pounds, the people, and the production. So as with any growth strategy, you need to invest and be in a position where you can inject some cash into any of your export projects. And obviously, depending on where in the world you're targeting, you can't always expect a return on any of that investment for 6 to 12 months. Even beyond that, it does take time. So you need to be in a position where you are able and willing to put some finance behind it, albeit that it's not necessarily needs to be significant, but that you are able to put something there, and you know the numbers that you can put forward for exporting. You then also need to think about the people. Who is going to lead on international development for your business and your brand? Is it yourself? Is it one of your team? Or maybe not. Do you develop in-house capabilities, or do you outsource? Or maybe there's a middle ground, perhaps, where you can contract in some experienced resource to get you started and up and running in the first place. And then in a longer term view is to build a team in-house once that's commercially viable and you're able to then perhaps bring somebody into the business and pay for that resource on a full-time basis. So there's lots of different ways that you could look at that, and that's a business decision. It's up to yourself as a business what's important. And do think about that, because obviously somebody is going to need to drive your international development and that export plan. Another area is your production, and you do need to have, if you're manufacturing goods, you do need to have some flexibility in your capabilities and capacity there, and be willing to make some tweaks or changes to service some specific export customer needs, some of which may be a request, but they may also be legally obligatory as well. So if you're thinking about your labeling or packaging, there may be legal requirements that means that when you are manufacturing, you do have to change some of your processes. So, you need to be aware of that and be willing to do that. Often you do start with lower quantities in export. So your customers won't necessarily, if you are accustomed to large production runs, some of your export customers, to begin with, testing the market out, may not be able to commit to such high volumes. So you need to see and be able to look at, are you willing to downscale some of your production and cater to some extra needs? And again, being able to see the long-term potential, because you may start off small and specific with some customers, but that business can become quite sizable quite quickly. So again, it's been able to manage that from a production point of view. And that is also why it's important to get all the stakeholders within the business on board with the strategic importance of exporting as well. So when obviously you've had a look at that about how to go about it, in terms of actually geographical choices and selecting the markets that you're looking at. I mean, literally with 196 countries to choose from, and often companies having little or no real prior international experience, starting out in exporting can be daunting for a lot of people. And some initial research and groundwork is important. Evidently finding out where there is demand for your product first and foremost. And I think one of the challenges there is finding the relevant data. As actually nowadays via the internet there is so much available that you can potentially have information overload. Global trends and statistics can be a useful starting point for gathering some top-line information, and they can help guide you as to whether a market maybe is worth exploring a bit further. But again, it will depend on is that information useful to you. So as an example, looking at the size of a population may be really useful to know. That's great, but actually if you have a premium product, then perhaps a better piece of information would be knowing how much of that large population would potentially have the purchasing power to buy that product. So, and I'm thinking of perhaps the Indian market being a prime example where population size is huge. They're a large population, the largest in the next few years, but actually the purchasing power of most people there, if it's a consumer product, is not going to be that strong. So it's looking at the data properly and finding the right information. Published reports can also be useful for certain industries as well. And at the British Library or the British Library Centres, which are up and down the country, you can gain free access to some of those reports as well. I know they can be quite expensive if you were to purchase from off your own back, but you can access through the British Library some, again, global reports, as well as perhaps more specific market information as well. Trade statistics can be another useful starting point. Again, that is where you can use the likes of the Market Access Database, which is a European portal, and Comtrade as well. Now, to do that, you do need to know your tariff codes for your products in advance, which you can get from gov.uk website. If you type in gov.uk tariff code, search for it if you don't know it already. And with that, you can then use Market Access Database or Comtrade to look at the trade that's happening outside the EU to other countries around the world. And again, it can be useful to see who's importing and exporting certain products. Now, you do also need to be wary of that, because some of those tariff codes will not be specific enough to what your product is, so it may encompass a category, so it won't be fully representative. And also, sometimes people may be importing a lot of a product and a tariff code, but they then may be exporting a lot account as well, so they're not necessarily consuming that product in that market. It's more of a trading ground, and obviously the likes of Belgium and Switzerland, the Netherlands can give slightly skewed data on that. So it can be another indication, like I say. And then really talking to your network, same when you're looking for partners, which we'll go on to later. Just speaking to other people and their experiences can be a really good starting point for some specific markets that people in your professional and personal networks may know about, and can signpost you to some interesting data, experiences, people to speak to as well that could be worth exploring further. A few tools to help you with this as well from a marketing point of view, which in my experience I've found quite helpful. A pestle can be good way from looking at the macro environment, so looking at factors outside of your control, outside of your business, that may influence some of the markets you're looking at, some of your market choices. So again, looking at that and going through that for your business, for your product mix, can be useful, and again an indicator of maybe where would be good to look at and possibly not from a market basis. A SWOT analysis, where you're looking at your own internal resources as well as the opportunities and threats externally, can be a good tool if you're realistic about that as well. And then from a competitor point of view, at the bottom there, a sort of take of the Porter's 5 forces. So that again is benchmarking yourself against your competition. That's important to look at when you are looking at market choices as well. Looking at the industry that you're working within and the markets you're looking to potentially enter. You know, where are new perhaps some already some of your competition entering, where are they not entering, and why, local competitions that may exist there, and the size of the potential market. So again, that can help you to look at and to help guide you through some market choices and decisions. So once you've had a look at that and you've got a better idea of which geographical markets may be the most suitable for you, and in all honesty, this is an iterative process. It is a case of understanding then which would be the best way to enter the market. So if you've got some choices there, or maybe some regions that you want to start looking at geographically now, how do you go about finding those first international customers? Where do you source them from? And part of that is also, how do you enter that market? Because obviously before you can reach your target customers, you need to know the routes in. And this is often an area where I see companies struggle the most with. So, and it is, like I say, an ongoing process that you will keep refining as you go through different steps with this. So I just wanted to give you a bit of advice on this. So, you know, route to market can be 2 ways. First of all, how is the product distributed, and which is the best route to market for your products? So with that, you can look at a number of ways. And, you know, there's often, if you've looked at other webinars, people may talk about exporting up to having agents, distributors working with you through that, to licensing, joint ventures, opening an office in a subsidiary. I think really for the small businesses starting out, exporting is the easiest way to begin, and generally working through other partners that are based in that market, so agents and distributors predominantly. But you do need to have a look at how that could work for you in the various markets you're looking at. And also within the route to market, which channels you will focus on as well. I mean, if we take an example of food and drink where we work, you could look at retail as a channel, which could be large retailers, small retailers, and maybe it's a direct to retail relationship that you're looking at, or maybe it is through an intermediary. There's also then food service, which is another large area and another channel that maybe for your business, if you were a food and drink brand, could you be looking at that as opposed to the retail channels? What about convenience? The convenience channel, the ready to go, the snacking channel, depending on your product mix, that could be somewhere that actually you would focus on predominantly to start with, as opposed to maybe going direct to retail. So there's quite a bit to think about there. Again, your product may have multiple applications, so thinking again from maybe engineering or medical products. You know, your products could be suitable for dental as well as human and animal, perhaps, industries. So how do you decide, you know, which ones to focus on with that as well? So like I say, that was kind of explaining a bit more about the route to market. I think when it comes to agents and distributors, that's again another area and a large topic in itself that, you know, we haven't got time in this webinar to go through in a lot of detail. There are different relationships that you will have, whether you pick an agent who would effectively be an introducer in that market and be able to find you the customers that you wouldn't have access to through obviously working within the UK. Now they then would charge normally a small fee for that introduction, but you essentially then deal with that customer directly for transactions, payments, and shipment of goods as well. Your distributor tends to get more involved, and they would generally take stock of your product in that market, and then have responsibility for servicing the needs of those customers. With your distributors, I think it's a good way to think of them is to see them as a bit of an extension of your sales force, and they're effectively like your sales manager in those particular markets. So the relationship you have with them tends to be closer, and will it require more resource from your perspective? Again, thinking about what resource do we have available. They will be, various demands, I guess, but you will need to look after them and develop those relationships quite closely with distributors. But they can often be a great starting point rather than looking at directly entering the market through your own trying to have a direct relationship with end customers or larger customers. They have a good network if they're a good partner, and if they have the right relationships, they can be a great starting point to enter the market. As well as thinking through where you and how you will enter that market, then obviously another aspect that I see time and time again is how do we price our products then? What will the strategy be for selecting the right price? And you do need to think, again, a number of extra factors around this. As what are the channels and how many people are in the chain, if you like, before you get to the end consumer, and being able to then factor in the amounts of margins that are needed for that. The transport costs, again, can be something that businesses forget about. If you are needing to get those goods into that market and your pricing needs to include that, then again, do some background research and speak to some logistics companies about what potential prices could be for your goods, so that you can factor that into your pricing if you need to. If it's an ex works price where basically they will pick the goods up from your warehouse, then that's probably an ideal scenario. And some businesses will do that, some customers will, but not always the case. So those costs need to be thought through. VAT, again, levels of VAT can change if you charge VAT on your products. Don't assume that everything's like it is in the UK either. You may actually be maybe advantageous in certain markets with lower levels of VAT, which can give you a better margin. Marketing support as well. If you are dealing with partners and distributors, then they will need extra support with that as well, and that is another cost to your business that you may need to factor in when it comes to your pricing as well. So with that, I'm thinking potentially free of charge stock, also maybe some leaflets or flyers, promotional items, etc., that they might need help with, that you need to maybe just factor in as well. So as well as your pricing, another area to think about is which products, depending on the range that you offer, which specific products will you take out into those international markets? And it may be a case that some of the products that you've had in your portfolio for quite a while, that maybe now in the UK it's quite saturated. Internationally, there may still be a big appetite for those products, and what you can see sometimes is that you can get some of the products that are maybe more mature in the UK are starting to decline, and some of your newer products are taking off. Don't overlook some of the products that you've had in your portfolio for a while, because they may still do very well internationally, and you can almost then extend your product life cycle of some of those goods. You also need to think about how you promote your products in those markets. Again, it's easy to think, well, in the UK, these are the messages that we give about the product. These are the selling points and the benefits. But actually, it's almost like you can see new markets with a bit of a blank sheet, and how do you want to create that messaging, and what are going to be the key benefits for your product? Brand Britain, the fact that if you do have a UK produced good, maybe not something that you necessarily shout about here in the domestic market, but actually in the taking it overseas, that is a really nice selling point, and it's something that buyers and customers are receptive to, and it's one of the things that helps them make a purchasing decision for your product. Premium, how premium do you want your product to be? Again, that can be, maybe it's not a premium product in the UK, but you may be able to premiumize and as a result, command higher prices overseas as well with your product. And that also ties back into your pricing strategy and understanding what the prices are in that market already for potentially similar goods. So do have a think about that. And then when it comes to actually where do you source some new customers then? Where do you find partners? And this is again a question that comes up time and time again. And there's lots of ways and areas that you can look at to do this. First and foremost, I would say leverage your existing networks. You've actually probably got a lot of people in your network who have experience internationally that can give you some contacts, some information. So look at those existing networks, both personally. I mean, LinkedIn can be a great tool as well to have a look in your network there on LinkedIn. Do you have anybody there that in the market that you're targeting that you could talk to? Even if they're not in the industry that you work in, they may be able to signpost you to somebody or a contact, or somebody in that market that could actually be really useful for you. Don't overlook your internal resources as well. If there's somebody within your business at the moment who, has an international background, speaks another language, they could be really useful to help you develop and have a look at some of those markets where they have more knowledge and a cultural awareness, and they can support you as well. Obviously, as well, the government agencies, DIT, I would say to everybody to engage with your local Department of International Trade, your DIT advisor locally. They can give you lots of details about what's available at the moment from a funding point of view, programs, events that are going on, any trade missions for your specific industry. And also they can put you in contact with the local people in post of the markets that you're looking at. And they can then also give you further more detailed information for that market. So, for example, this week I was doing some work for a client, and I spoke to the DIT equivalent in France. So we were having a conversation. They were giving some helpful tips. They were giving helpful tips about some of the shows that we could be looking at, and some of the contacts as well. You can also ask for contacts for them for introductions to perhaps target people that you're looking for, and again, they're very open and willing to do that, and they can be a good starting point. Your local chambers of commerce, which generally is a good place for your documentation, but again, they have other people in other parts of, particularly in Europe, that can be helpful with their embassy equivalents in post to give details and extra information. Trade fairs, again, is quite a classic one where people will use trade fairs to try and find new customers. And, there's different ways of doing this. You don't necessarily have to exhibit. It could just be a case of visiting to start with and walking the floor and getting a feel for, is there a good kind of feel for this this trade fair? Are there good potential customers for us? Who's exhibiting? You can also use the trade fairs to glean information as well, just looking at who's exhibiting without even attending, looking at the shows, who's exhibiting, and visiting the websites of the trade fairs can give you some information of who's active in that market and who are the people in various markets selling similar goods. Trade associations are another way in the target, both your own in the UK, your own trade association, and in your target market as well, who will have a member base that could give you some industry information and potentially some customer or partner details that you could find and source as well. Evidently, using the internet and searching through the internet is another way, using Google search. I've done that myself and found new partners just literally through putting something in there in Swiss, in Swedish, sorry, and actually finding a partner for Sweden just through that and cold calling, and then we developed a relationship. and look at your competitors' activities. Check their websites and see what information they may be giving away, which markets they're entering. I'm still quite surprised. Quite a lot of companies will still publish lists of the partners that they're working with, their distributors out there. So again, that can be useful to give you an indication of where they're active, where the opportunities may be, as well. So, and also as you're going through this, you will then start to develop, and I think it's important to do so, what I would call an ideal partner checklist. So these are the attributes that are important to you and your business. Because as I say, the people that are working for you in the market are an extension of your sales force. So you need to sort of have a look at what would be an ideal partner in those markets, who are you looking for. So as you are searching, through time, you'll start to be able to recognize this could be a good partner because they're doing X, Y, Z, which we are also looking for. And that's important for us in our business as well. Another aspect we were looking at, just going back, in terms of once you've found some people that may be good potential partners to work with, vetting those prospects is something that, again, not everybody does, but is important to do so. And don't be afraid to, ask for references. If it's somebody that's approached you or you've proactively sought them out, things are developing well, they seem to be, potentially great for your business in your target market. Ask for references, see who else they are actually dealing with, what are the products they're currently working with, and what their reputation is like in the marketplace. That's a great way of being able to sort of feel more comfortable when you're working with them. And if they're a good partner, they will give you some references. Go and talk to other people who are currently selling products to them. Find out if they're any good. And again, establishing what the reputation is in the marketplace is important. You may be able to find that they will service your need and take you on board, but are they the right fit for you? Ask for a business plan as well from them. What would they do with your brand in their market, and where would they be looking to sell it, and what support do they need? And another area, like I say, is looking at their values, their company values versus your own. Do their values match yours? Because ultimately, you will have to work very closely with them. So you do need to get on with them because you are going to be communicating regularly to try and grow that business. So when it comes to then negotiating the sale, so hopefully by this point you've had a look at some target markets, you've selected some, you've then been looking at sourcing partners, customers, whoever, in whichever guise they may be, and then it comes to negotiating on your first sale. And for me, the most important thing is a flexible approach when you're dealing with overseas clients. Flexible in many ways. So the pricing may need to have some flexibility, even though you've already thought through, what your price points may be. You do need to build in some flexibility with that, and again with your sale terms and conditions as well. So a prime example would be specifically when you're dealing with the Middle East, you do need to be ready to negotiate, and that's just culturally the way that they do business. So don't be afraid of that, but do make sure that you build in a bit more margin in that part of the world. So a prime example is I've been dealing with a client, a possible customer in Kuwait, and they were just this week, and they were asking for 25% discount on the price that had been offered, and I then said, okay, well, we'll give you a smaller amount of that, a smaller margin. Then they'll come back and say they want some marketing support, i.e. free of charge goods, which I knew they would do. So again, I'd built in enough margin so that I could give them a discount that culturally they wanted, plus the stock, I knew they would want some free of charge stock as well. So that was all built in and as part of the negotiation. And again, it's just the Middle East and some of those areas can take a bit of time. And again, I've learned through my own experiences that you just need to go with that and, let them come back to you when they're ready and not come across as wanting the sale too much. If they're aware that, you want the business, and they can be, in a strong position from a negotiation point of view. And And I think when you're negotiating with people, you know, regardless of whether it's export or not, really, it really is about finding out what they need, and what they're willing to trade off, and what you're willing to trade off as well. And actually, a lot of support that they may be asking for through the negotiation, I've found in my experience you can give them, but it's not necessarily that expensive to you. So again, marketing materials, what have you already got existing from your UK materials that you could perhaps adapt quite quickly, or even use and then just change some very small details for their market? And again, that's cost effective, but it's really important for them, and that can be part of the negotiation, but quite easy for you to do. Training support, again, is something to offer out, but that can be done via Skype, not necessarily in person as well. You know, so it's looking at what exactly within the deal is important for them and for yourself as a business, and being able to make the necessary trade-offs with that. Another area that I wanted to sort of look at for everyone as well is the admin side, because I know, again, I get a lot of questions about where can we go for support with this, what do we do with documentation, product registration and logistics tend to be the areas that people obviously need some extra help with. And yes, at first it can be quite difficult, but I think once you know what you're doing, it's fairly straightforward. So when it comes to, if we start with documentation, if you are selling outside of the EU, you generally will need some documentation, certificates of origin, which stipulates where the product has come from, an EUR1 form, which helps with reduced duties, always needed one for Lebanon for that, commercial invoices and packing lists. Now, often your partner in market can give you details of exactly what they want. Otherwise, your local chambers of commerce, they tend to be the experts when it comes to documentation, and can also advise you on for which markets they believe documentation will be needed. Another area is when you're sending samples. Now, if you're sending samples before you've obviously got to the sale outside of the EU, you will need to provide a commercial invoice and packing list. Again, you'll need to stipulate that these items are for sample purposes only, no commercial value. So, and again, your partner can often give you what they need for that. You know, if they're used to bringing in goods and importing goods, they will be knowledgeable about what's required. So take advice from them when it comes to other documentation that's needed, as well as ask your local chambers of commerce as well. When it comes to logistics, you can work with a number of logistics partners, and I'm used to doing that. Logistics partners or a freight forwarder. My advice is always ask for quotes from a variety of providers, whether that's road freight, for Europe, sea freight, air freight. You'll find that some carriers are stronger on certain modes of transport and for certain markets and territories than they are for others. So it's always worth cross-referencing and getting a couple of quotes. And don't be afraid to ask for discounts and for a better price. Generally speaking, that they build some flexibility into their costings as well. So if don't be afraid to negotiate with them as well. Another area to think of with your logistics is the insurance aspect. What does your existing policies cover? Because when it goes through long haul, you may need extra insurance, which again, the transport providers can cover per shipment, or you may want to take out an annual policy. Final point on that, on logistics, is do you need to think about temperature control or fragile items that you're transporting? Do you need to consider that? And if so, again, your logistics partners or people you're talking to for the shipments can advise on that, but there may be obviously extra precautions and costs involved with that as well. And when it comes to registering your products with the relevant authorities, generally speaking, your partners will know which documents are needed. If they're any good as a partner, they should know specifically what documents. But also you need to be aware that there may be some hidden costs in there to factor in. providing documents is fine, certificates of analysis, etc., but they may need, as part of that registration process, for those documents to also be certified or legalised. Now, certification is where the local chambers will certify the document that it's a true copy. Legalisation is where the documents will then go off to the relevant embassies for that specific market. So if you were dealing with, I don't know, a document for Qatar, for example, like I've been doing at the moment, it will be certified by a local chamber and then goes off to the Qatar embassy in the UK for legalisation. There's a cost involved with that as well, and depending on how many documents you need to have for the registration, that can mount up and can be, in some markets, quite costly. So be aware of that and find out what the costs may be once you start talking to people in those markets. Go to your chamber and ask what the cost will be for those certifications or legalizations. Notarizing is another area that, specifically for Russia and Iran, may be required as part of that process, and again can be very costly. So just be aware of that as well. Finally, when it comes to winning repeat business, and you know, I would say sometimes the first sale can actually be easier than you anticipate. And for me, and in my experience, it's the further sales down the line that sort of can prove more challenging, and also then helps you build up your actual export business, either with the same customer or in a new market. So for me, when you're exporting, it is about building trust, which does take time. But as far as I know, and my experiences, it can be a very worthwhile and fruitful growth strategy for businesses in the end when it's done correctly. So I think I'm running out of time, really. So whilst I've got lots more I could say, I'd like to also give a bit of time for the polls and for any questions that anybody may have. So I'll hand back over to Jill, and then we can answer some of your questions. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and over to you, Jill.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and thank you for the great presentation there. As Victoria mentioned, we're just going to run a couple of polls, and you will see a very quick question on your screen. Is your company currently new to exporting, an occasional exporter, or a regular exporter? And if you can just select the radial dial against the most appropriate answer and click submit at the bottom. And while you're all really quick at putting the responses in, and I'll just give you another moment, and then we'll close that poll and share the results with you. And here on the screen you can see most of your audience today are new to exporting, and we'll just run our second poll here, and this is very, very similar, but this is asking you as an individual new to exporting, an occasional exporter, or a regular exporter. And again, if you could please click on the most appropriate answer and click submit at the bottom. Thank you very much, and we'll now close that and share those results with you. So now again, new to exporting is the highest percentage there. So as Victoria mentioned, we are now going to begin answering the questions that have been coming in so far from the audience. And our first question here, Victoria, is from Richard. Richard's asking, how important is it for you or someone leading your exports to speak the language of your target market?
I think, evidently, if somebody speaks the language of the market that you're looking at, and it has cultural awareness of that market, knows how it operates, then it can be advantageous for you to enter that market when you're able to communicate with your target customers in their language. It makes communication easier at times, and you can build up trust quicker, and you understand culturally the way they work as well. So it can be advantageous. what I would say is that it's not necessarily the absolutely fundamental, and I've seen people be very successful building their export business with members of their team who speak no foreign languages at all. I think what the key to it is, though, is making sure that if you are speaking English, that it's business English, and that you are clear and you use good standard business English to communicate with people, and be aware of, as a native speaker, how you talk, the speed at which you speak, and making sure that the other person feels comfortable speaking with you, communicating with you. And that, for me, as a linguist myself, I speak other languages, but for me it's about, when you are speaking English with somebody else, communicating clearly, and checking that they understand, and putting them at ease when they are effectively speaking a foreign language. And that, for me, is where you would get the most success.
Thank you very much. And a question here from Marlene. Marlene's asking, which is better, getting the right market or the right partner?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, having worked with distributors in market as the standard route to market, it's more about the right partner. Because if you have the right partner on board, regardless of what market they work in, and they're working hard to promote and sell your product, and that's a working, fruitful relationship, you will gain more traction in that market as a result, and more opportunities to work well together. Getting the right market is great, but if you've not got the right person either running your exports from the UK, if you're doing it that way, or in that market specifically, then whilst it may be a great market for you, if you cannot reach out with the right partner, then you will struggle to obviously gain the traction, the inroads that you need. So for me, the right partner is more important than the right market.
Thank you, Victoria. And a question here from Martin. Martin's asking, how valuable do you think international trade fairs are for developing your international footprint?
I mean, trade fairs is another area that I see, and personally, through the years, I've had a lot of success with. They are a great way to explore markets and opportunities, find new partners. A lot of it comes down to how you prepare for that and how you execute that trade fair. If you're exhibiting, turning up and expecting people to walk by and to get sales that way, it unfortunately is not the reality, and you could end up spending a lot of money and resource on a show that, if you've not prepared properly for, can be a waste of money. So you do need to sort of look at which ones would be the most beneficial for you, and then making sure that the ones you've selected, you put in the necessary preparation, training for anybody on the stand, you all understand what the objectives are for that trade fair, and you make sure that you then do your utmost to achieve that. Another area with it is the follow-up. I see a lot of companies who will invest in the stand, invest in people to be there, prepare for it, and then the show goes really well. They have a number of leads. They come back, and they're not properly followed up, and the day-to-day takes over. So it is important with the trade fairs as a project to make sure that you do allocate the resource for the post-show and the follow-up, because that's where I see a lot of missed opportunities by companies that just don't follow up effectively afterwards, and that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. And a couple of questions here from Lewis. You mentioned in your presentation that you've moved around quite a lot. So where are you based now? And in your role with Boss Global, are you acting as a consultant?
Okay, so in terms of based now, I guess geographically, I'm up in Leeds, where I've been based for most of my time. Sector-wise, I now work within the health, food and beverage sector, and also supplements as well, food supplements and sports nutrition brands, who I predominantly deal with. In terms of Bols Global, the way we work is that yes, there's an element of consulting, but we don't necessarily just consult. We also get involved in the doing, which again is an area that most small businesses need the help with. It's great to put together a plan and help on some strategy, but then who's going to execute that and carry out that plan? And it's not always the people within the business that either want to do it or have the time to do it or have the confidence and prior experience to do it. So that's where, as a point of difference, we come in and can drive that for businesses and brands if it's something that they want extra support with, either on an in-house or outsourced basis as well.
Thank you very much. And got an interesting question here from David. David is saying he's yet to lay out a business plan, but the ideas are in the pipeline. Do you have a good starting point for resources regarding import also? Thinking of import-export with UK and I believe that's Vietnam in his question.
Okay. So looking at bringing products in from Vietnam. I mean, a lot of my experience has been on an export basis, but I think some of the things I've talked about today, if you kind of look at it from the other perspective, it's the same idea on an import basis, looking at obviously then the opportunities within the UK for your product. If you've selected importation into the UK as something that, for whatever reason and rationale is a good potential market for you that you're looking at, some of the tools in terms of who to speak to and some of the resources and research you can do. I mean, as well as the British Library obviously giving research and reports on global markets, there will be plenty of information on the UK and the UK market for your product mix as well. If you are UK based, going to trade fairs or attending some of the seminars and events and maybe any missions that may be available on an inward investment basis or an import basis can be again a good starting point. But I don't have a huge amount of experience in that area. Like I say, it tends to be more export. But if I was looking on an import basis, then I think there's a number of ways you could start that.
Thank you very much. And being conscious of time, we'll probably be able to fit in just a couple more quick questions here. A question from Bharvi. Is there any website or a link or associations where they can source the right importer for the export from the UK? They've got a drinks product and they want to expand into different countries, but not really knowing the best way to find the right partner.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging, isn't it? And that's what, like I say, a lot of people are asking, where do I find the right partner? Where do I find the right partner in those markets? And unfortunately, there is no key area or one way of doing it, one process to follow, and you can find your ideal partner. I would say if you've got an idea of different markets and countries you're looking at, the DIT website do have opportunities where you can have a look and search for your particular type of product if there's anybody globally that are looking for those opportunities, those particular products that you're offering or category. So you can do a search on that through the Exporting is Great website, and that will be normally facilitated through DIT. Again, you can look at some trade B2B websites and directories and may be able to, it's specific to your area, find some partners there, but they will probably need vetting. It's just a directory, not necessarily saying how credible or reputable they are. And again, being able to look at associations with, if this is a drinks product, the food and drinks federation do have affiliations. There is a trade association in the UK called FDEA. They can also give some information on you know, routes to market, potential partners, people to deal with. They could be worth having a look at as well.
Thank you. And a question here from Joe. Two-part question. Outside Canada, USA, Australia and New Zealand, which countries welcome software written in English? And the second part of the questions, which countries would you avoid providing software to and why?
Okay, I mean, I think in terms of software as an industry, I don't personally have a lot of information on that. I think it'd be difficult for me to answer which countries specifically to avoid. I don't think I have enough knowledge in that area. In terms of software written in English, I mean, a lot of places now, you know, English is a key language for most people. So it would come down to, I guess, the people that you were providing it to and who would be obviously using that software and what level of English they could potentially have or not have. And I think once you start to find partners in those markets, they will soon be able to tell you quite quickly whether it would need to be, you know, written in another language or local languages for that particular product. I'm sorry, I can't really give any other kind of real information because I don't have enough sector knowledge. So,
and I would advise contacting your local trade advisor from the Department for International Trade, who would be able to give more information and look at that for you. And a question here from Velo. In your opinion, what are the global health, food and drink trends? And how is this sector being disrupted by technology?
Yeah, it's an interesting place at the moment. I mean, health, food and drink at the moment, and there's lots of different areas within that, you know, whether you're looking at the organic segment, whether you're looking at the free from, so obviously gluten, like wheat-free, dairy-free, etc. Then you have the vegan and the vegetarian segment as well, which is doing really well. In terms of, you know, it's a booming area, I would say in general, those areas of health food and well-being, you know, it's high on everybody's agenda. We tend to, the US obviously tends to lead the way, and the UK, you know, we have some great innovative products that people do want in these areas. It tends to be, from my experience, some of the other international European and obviously further afield markets are not necessarily as advanced in some of those areas, and they are looking for some of the innovation coming out of the UK, which is great for us and great for the UK brands that are manufacturing these kinds of goods. The technology is definitely a key one that, you know, online now and for e-commerce, there's a lot of demand and appetite for that. So whilst I think at the moment the traditional methods and traditional retail is still predominant, you know, you only have to look at the statistics and the way that the market's changing to know that online sales of goods, you know, health, food and drink being one of them, are starting to see they have seen significant growth, but they're also now starting to see that potentially will impact on some of the standard retailing that we've kind of always known in the past. So I think the next sort of 10 years is going to be quite interesting, and how that will shift, and it will shift. So it's not just looking at traditional you know, retailing, it's looking at who's working and operating online as well as a potential partner sometimes.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And if you don't mind, I know we have run over, but we'll just fit in one last question that we have here. I know we haven't got to all of your questions today, but we will follow up with you after the webinar. So the last question that we're going to take is from Christopher. Christopher's asking, is it possible or realistic to initially target and focus efforts towards finding importers who will buy and distribute products in bulk without the need to invest in the supply chain, for example, marketing literature, promotions, rebates, etc. What's your view on that?
Anything, to be honest, anything is possible. And, you know, I've seen it when I've worked for small businesses and some clients that are quite new to exporting. They don't have necessarily the marketing materials or promotions that they can offer out to people and partners and importers. So actually, a lot of it really is, I would say, yes, it's possible to do very much, you know, to be able to enter new markets with very little, you know, marketing collateral and support that you can give. I think it comes down to making sure that, you know, what you're offering price-wise stacks up in that market for them, and that, you know, different partners need different things. So some partners will need more support and investment in the supply chain, but actually some of them won't. And if it is a bulk product, if they are then using that product for something, you know, to develop or as part of a component for something else, then they're not necessarily going to need a lot of investment from yourself as the seller of those goods. So it comes down to really then understanding what they need. But then part of your strategy could be to target the people where there is less need for that level of investment. And some, you know, everybody's like any customer in the UK, everybody's got different needs. So it's just understanding, you know, what you can get by on and offering and what would be acceptable for them.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for staying and doing all the questions from your audience today. And it just leaves it to me to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave the webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. It's just 3 really quick questions. So we would be grateful if you could keep your browser window open and complete that and provide your feedback for us. And as we mentioned, you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 hours, which will include a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of the Department for International Trade and our presenter, thank you so much for joining us, and please do all enjoy your weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you.